Okay, how everyone doing this evening? Thank you for coming for this we're on the last stretch here. Before we get into our presentation, I first off want to introduce ourselves. My name is Bryant Hawkins. I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana. I work at Manning Family Children's Hospital, and I've been in this industry for 32 years. I'll turn it over to my counterpart.
Hello, everyone. Thank you again for coming. My name is Kiera Amaro. I am from Buffalo, New York. I work at Kaleida Health as a lead biomed technician right now, and I've been in the industry for 2 years.
All right. Now, as the things say there, still becoming the rookie and the veteran. So this presentation is going to kind of give you guys the best of both worlds. See how she thinks about something, how I think about it, and we're going to clash it together to make it make sense so where we all can go back and know how to deal with that generation gap that we have right now. That's definitely going on in the industry. But before we get started, if anybody know me, I always have a video. There's a moment in every career where you realize you don't know as much as you thought you did. And that moment doesn't mean you're behind, it means you've just begun.
Because starting out doesn't feel like confidence, it feels like pressure. It feels like walking into rooms where everyone expects you to have answers before you even found your voice.
And somewhere on the other side of that journey is someone who's been doing this for years, decades, who remembers exactly what it felt like to not be ready.
But here's where it gets complicated because what looks like confidence can feel like distance. What feels like experience can sound like silence to someone still learning.
And if we're not careful, we start missing each other. Not because we don't care, but because we don't communicate.
One generation is trying to prove themselves, and the other is trying to protect what they've built.
But this was never meant to be a divide.
It was meant to be a connection.
Because growth doesn't happen in isolation.
And confidence doesn't grow in silence.
It grows when someone says, I see where you are.
And I'm willing to meet you there.
This industry doesn't need more competition between generations.
It needs more collaboration between perspectives.
Because experience was never meant to be guarded.
It was meant to be shared.
And being new isn't a weakness.
It's a starting point.
You're not behind.
You're becoming.
You're not late.
You're learning. You're not unprepared.
You're evolving. Whether you're 2 years in
Or at 32.
you still have something to give. The question isn't where you are.
The question is, what are you becoming?
July 1993, 32 years ago, I walked into my first hospital as a young professional. And if I'm being honest, I didn't walk in confident. I walked in curious and a little unsure. I didn't know that I would still be here 3 decades later. I didn't know the rooms I would walk into. I didn't know the pressure I would carry, or the people I would eventually help develop. Back then, I was just trying to prove myself. Today, I'm trying to multiply myself. And standing next to me is someone 2 years in the industry, 2 years on her journey, 32 years on mine. And here's what both of us know just from different seasons. You never really arrive, you just keep becoming. Kiara?
Okay, y'all, I'm nervous, so if I stutter, give grace. Well, I still remember my very first service call in labor and delivery. Not because the issue itself was extraordinary, but because of how routine it appeared on paper compared to how intense it felt once I arrived. Before that day, I had done everything I believed I was supposed to do. I had prepared, I shadowed the department alongside a senior technician for over 3 months, and I observed the unit. I took mental notes, I asked questions, and I learned the rhythm of the environment. So when the call came in, I genuinely thought, this is a piece of cake. I can do this myself. Well, at least I believed that while I was walking there. But labor and delivery has a different kind of energy. The moment those doors opened, everything shifted for me. There was movement everywhere, monitors alarming, voices moving quickly across the room, and a nurse looked dead at me as if my arrival meant some relief for her. I still remember her expression. She was frantic, not rude or impatient, but just carrying that kind of urgency that comes when every second matters. And suddenly, all the preparation I had done became very quiet in my mind because now it was no longer practice. There was no senior tech beside me, and no one was whispering, maybe start here. No one confirming whether I was on the right track or not. It was just me. And a room full of people expecting me to know exactly what to do in a short amount of time. And technically, I did understand the issue. I had seen it before. It was a fetal monitor that was feeding paper, but no trace was on it. So it sounded simple, just a printer issue, a paper output failure, maybe. But knowing something intellectually and then trusting yourself under pressure are two very different things. So I hesitated. That hesitation probably lasted only seconds, but in the moment it felt much longer. I observed the troubleshooting questions, like asking, did you feed the paper incorrectly? And while I asked those questions, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, in the back of my mind, I kept asking, what if I miss something? What if I fix one issue and create another? What if they can tell that I'm unsure?
Put that one on.
Okay. So I stepped back and I called a colleague. She had more years than I did, more experience, and more moments like this underneath her belt already. And I remember standing there, phone in hand, listening carefully, not because I knew nothing, but because part of me needed permission to trust what I already understood. And while she talked me through it, I realized something very important, that sometimes asking for help is not a weakness. Sometimes it can be the bridge between confidence and knowledge. Because the confidence, at least in that moment, was not loud for me. It did not arrive as certainty. It sounded more like, I have this kind of figured out, but I can ask questions to be certified. It was much quieter than that. So I took a deep breath. I checked what I knew. I used what I learned. And once I settled myself, I worked along the issue. The thermal recorder just needed a new roller for the door assembly. The solution was straightforward, and once identified, I replaced the printer door assembly, re-engaged the roller, and tested the output. Not dramatically, not perfectly, but correctly. And afterwards, what stayed with me was not the repair itself, it was the lesson. That confidence does not grow in silence, where people are afraid to ask questions. It does not grow when people feel pressured to pretend that they know everything. It grows in an environment where people are invited to learn out loud, where reassurance is not mistaken for a weakness, where experience is shared instead of guarded. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can say in a critical moment is, I know part of this, but can you help me confirm the rest? And over time, those moments changed me. Eventually, I became the person that newer technicians called, and then I understood why my colleague truly gave me that day. And it wasn't just technical support. She gave me room to grow without shame. And that taught me something I still carry with me now. That confidence is built when people do not make you feel small when you're still trying to become. Bryant.
Now, I can remember being the youngest in the room too. Not just young in age, young in experience, young in confidence. And I would sit in meetings and think more than I probably should have spoke. Replaying words in my head before I ever spoke out loud because I wasn't trying to be heard. because I didn't want to make a mistake. I was trying to be this person that everybody thought was taking things seriously. And over time, though, something shifted. Not overnight, but gradually, I became the one in the room with the most experience. So people started asking me questions. And it made me realize one thing, that everything happens in time. I became the one with the most experience. And anyone with the most experience, no, that comes with weight. Because now you have to ask the question, now no longer you asking, do I belong here? But you're asking, am I creating space for someone else to belong here? Because experience, that gives you a voice, but leadership determines how you use it. And I had to learn something that took me years to learn. Experience can either build a wall or it can build a bridge. A wall says this, I figured it out, now you go figure it out. But a bridge says, I learned the hard way so you don't have to. And that's the difference between those two. Communication. Yeah.
Sometimes early in your career, you don't need someone to lower the standard. You need someone to explain the standard. You need someone to say, here's why this matters. Here's how this decision affects patients. Here's what I've learned the hard way. Because when context is missing, confidence can struggle. However, when context is shared, confidence can strengthen. What I have learned while working in healthcare is that often what looks like a skill gap is usually a communication gap. And many times that communication gap lives inside something we don't talk openly about enough, the generational gap. Because every generation enters the workplace carrying its own habits, strengths, and stereotypes. The baby boomers often get described as a generation that believes in staying late, pushing through, figuring it out no matter how difficult it is. Gen X often carries a strong independence, very resourceful, often the ones that have learned to adapt without needing much direction. Millennials are often the generation that started to push for work-life balance, asking questions about purpose, process, and culture. And then there's my generation Z. And depending on who's describing us, we can either be called innovative or impatient, confident or too outspoken, fast or too eager to change things before fully understanding why they were built the way they were. And honestly, sometimes I understand why those perceptions exist because Gen Z does move differently. We grew up in a world where information is immediate. We grew up in a world where if something breaks, our instinct is to immediately troubleshoot quickly. If a system feels insufficient, our instinct is to ask, why are we doing it this way? Can this be better? Can this be faster? Not because we disrespect what came before us, but because we naturally look for ways to improve what already exists. We are highly digital, highly adaptive, and very comfortable learning systems quickly. So many of us generally come into the workplace excited, not just to do our own jobs well, but to help everyone around us work more efficiently. And sometimes that means noticing small things others have learned to live with, a repeated delay, an outdated process, a communication habit that creates confusion. And our first instinct is to often ask, how can I make this smoother? Can we save anyone time in this process? But sometimes that excitement can be misunderstood. What one generation experiences as initiative, another may experience as interruption. What feels like innovation to one person can sound like criticism to another. Not because we as people don't care, but because from often we're speaking from different workplace experiences. While someone newer may think, I know I'm new, but I still see some value in this. An older generation can think, we've tried this before and it's not working. But new perspectives matter too, because fresh eyes often notice what routine no longer questions. And I think the strongest workplace is not the ones where one generation wins. It's where generations collab in an effort to understand both sides. And once and once understanding grows, confidence can flow. I think about that often now because I realize something important, that the goal is not for Gen Z to become like the older generations, nor is it for older generations to suddenly work like Gen Z. The goal is translation. It's to learn how each generation contributes without assuming differences means resistance. Because when that happens, the workplace stops feeling divided by age, and we can start being strengthened by perspectives. And in healthcare, especially, this matters because ultimately the patient is the priority. And when that happens, everybody can win. Bryant?
Now, from where I stand, I have the privilege of working with all those different generations. I've seen the work ethic, the independence, the questions, and as she says, the innovation. And I've also seen how quickly misunderstanding or misunderstood things can happen between these different generations. When we stop listening and start labeling, because it's all easy. I mean, they don't work like we used to do. How many of us have said that these young people, they don't work like we used to? They ask too many questions. They want things too fast. But what if we were calling this a little different? It's actually development. Sorry about that. My apologies. What if the question is not aren't disrespect? They're not being disrespectful. We think they're being curious. What if the speed isn't importance, but it's them being efficient? Because every generation solves problems. In this part here, it took me to learn. Every generation is going to solve problems the way the world they were raised in. Because we think about it from the world we were raised in. And sometimes I get caught up in saying, man, my son, when I was his age, I was doing this. But he not doing the same thing I was doing at his age that I was at. So they're growing up in a different world, and we have to adjust to that fact that they have more resources. So the things that they're going to come across, they come across it faster, whether it's for good or for bad. And we just have to understand that we have to not lose that connection, but try to find progress in that. Because the gap to me isn't the problem. The gap becomes the problem when nobody takes responsibility, meaning us, to bridge it. Yeah. I'm gonna ask you a question. What is one moment that shaped how you see mentorship?
Hmm. Okay. So there's a moment in my career when I made a mistake. And it wasn't because I lacked the ability. It was because I allowed comfort to blur my awareness of the environment that I was in. It happened during a department meeting. The atmosphere felt familiar, and in that comfort, I chose to be playful. I made a joke with management, thinking that it would lighten the mood. But almost immediately, I realized that I misread the setting. What felt casual to me did not fit the tone of the professional space. And I understood right away I had stepped outside of what that moment needed me to be. At first, what stayed with me was the embarrassment, the kind that makes you replay it in your head, trying to think of why you said that in the first place, thinking how it sounded to the others in the room, how it may have been received, and ultimately wishing that I could take it back. Because sometimes the hardest mistakes are not the technical ones that we make. Sometimes there's just a moment where your judgment simply arrives a second too late. What mattered most, though, was what happened afterwards. My manager did not address it in a way that made me feel exposed. He did not correct me in front of the others. He allowed the moment to become something, he did not allow the moment to become something public. Instead, he pulled me aside privately. He gave me room to speak, and he allowed me to apologize. He allowed me to explain where my mindset had been and why I had approached the moment the way that I did. And in that conversation, he said something that sits with me far longer than the mistake that I made. He told me that I was capable of more than what I had chosen to display in that moment. He acknowledged that what I did was not in my best choice, but he also made it clear that one poor decision does not define my character. One mistake did not erase my value, and it certainly did not cancel out my potential. Then he said something even more important. He told me that I still had the qualities needed to become a thriving leader. And just as someone had once recognized in him, those same qualities stay still. What struck with me was that he did not focus on my behavior. He spoke to my identity. He saw beyond that moment and reminded me that growth is not about pretending mistakes never happen. It's about learning who I can still become after they do. That conversation changed how I understood leadership because correction alone, yes, can fix the task. It addresses what happens. However, the conversation does something deeper. It builds confidence. It restored my perspective, and it gives someone room to improve without feeling reduced to just one moment. And sometimes that is what people remember most. Not what they were corrected on, but how someone believed in them and thought they were still investing in afterwards. The moment taught me that leadership is not only about taking accountability, it is also about knowing how to correct someone without making them feel small while they're still trying to grow. So, Bryant, what moment made you realize that communication had to change?
When I noticed talented young professionals going silent. The young people have the skill, they're prepared, they're capable, but they weren't speaking. And at first I thought, man, they need to step up. But then I had to ask myself, is it them or is it the environment that they're in? Because people don't go quiet for no reason. Sometimes they don't feel heard. Sometimes they don't feel ready. Sometimes someone with more experience has already overwhelmed the room that they're in. And that was humbling to me because leadership isn't just about what you know, it's about what you make possible for others. So I had to change the way I thought about it. I had to learn to listen more than speak, pay attention to who wasn't speaking, not just who was. Because leadership is not about being the loudest person in the room, it's about making sure the room has more than one voice in it. Now, if you are early in your career, growth is your responsibility. Growth, not entitlement, not shortcuts, growth. And growth requires what? Discipline. Discipline to prepare when no one is watching. Discipline to ask questions when it's uncomfortable. Discipline to stay curious even when you feel confident. Because one day you won't be the one asking questions anymore. You'll be the one people look to for answers. And when that day comes, you won't rise to the level of what you expect. You will rise to the level of the preparation you have for that moment that comes your way. Kiara?
So, if you're seasoned, multiplication is your responsibility, as Brian said, not control, not comparison, multiplication. Because experience was never meant to be collected and protected, it was meant to be shared. It was meant to be something that lives beyond you. And I think sometimes in workplaces, especially fast moving ones, experience can unintentionally become guarded. Not because people mean harm, but because when you have spent years learning something the hard way, there's a natural instinct to protect the standard by holding tightly to what you know. But the true leadership is measured by how much knowledge you hold. It's measured by how much confidence grows around you. Because if someone has worked for years, solved difficult problems, learned the mistakes, and survived the pressure, the new question becomes, what are you doing with all that you know? Are you only using it to maintain authority, or are you using it to build capacity in someone else? Because multiplication means more than just teaching tasks. It means explaining your thinking, not just saying, do it this way, but saying, this is why I chose to do it this way. This is what I've noticed. This is what can go wrong if we miss this detail. These kinds of explanations give people more than just instructions. It gives them understanding. And understanding creates confidence much faster than correction alone ever will. When people understand the reason behind a decision, they are more likely to grow into making their own decisions themselves. And that matters because a workplace becomes stronger when knowledge just stays with one person. It becomes stronger when knowledge moves, when people feel invited into the thinking, not just the assigned task. So we have to invite perspective, even from the person who has not found their confidence yet, or how to integrate into a conversation they want to be a part of. because a fresh perspective often enters quietly before it enters boldly. And if the room only values the loudest voice, valuable insight may be lost. Silence does not always mean agreement. Silence does not always mean uncertainty. Sometimes it can mean, I have a thought, but I don't know if it belongs here. Sometimes it can mean, I'm still learning the language of the room. Sometimes it can even mean, I just don't want to sound inexperienced. And that is why seasoned people matter so deeply, because leadership is not only speaking well, it's noticing who has not spoken yet. It's creating a room where someone feels safe enough to contribute what they fully believe in themselves. Because many people do not need someone to speak for them. They need someone to make a space long enough for them to speak for themselves. And when that happens, multiplication can actually begin, not just of knowledge, but confidence, leadership, and possibility. Because the strongest legacy in the workplace is not just what you've accomplished, it is who became stronger alongside you and who's willing to share that with you. Bryant.
And if you're in the middle, you are the bridge. Bridges carry weight. They hold tension. They connect what would otherwise stay divided. You understand what it feels like to be new and what it means to carry responsibility as a seasoned HTM professional. So your role is critical, the older ones, the ones that's got the experience. Our roles are critical because you translate. You take experience and make it understandable. You take new ideas and make them actionable. And you keep things moving, even when it's uncomfortable. Because without bridges, connection breaks down. And when connections break down, so does progress. Yeah.
Technology will continue to evolve, AI will definitely expand, and systems will grow more complex. But emotional intelligence does not update automatically. Listening does not install itself, and humility does not download overnight. These are all choices we make. Ryan.
The future of HTM will not be determined by who has more years. I have 30 plus years. I'm not going to be able to determine what the future of HTM is. She has two. She's not. It will be determined by communication with more clarity, by who listens with more intention, by who chooses collaboration over ego. Because it takes a humbling person to take advice from someone who's 2 years in the industry. But that's what we have to do as leaders. We can't just assume we know because we got more years. Because 2 years and 32 years, they are not competing, they're complementing. 2 years,
Or 32 years.
different seasons.
Share responsibility.
I'm still learning,
I'm still growing,
still
becoming.
becoming. Now, I want y'all not to confuse seasons with ceilings. Because some people can be at a certain part of their career and say, oh, I'm at the top, I made it. Or some may be at the very bottom and say, it's too difficult for me to get there. But it's not. You're right where you're supposed to be for that time. But how do you grow from here? I'm really talking to the ones that's been in the industry over 10 years. How do you grow? You got a voice. How do you use it? Because honestly, what we do as experienced HTM professionals will help the ones following behind us like Kiara. So what are we doing? That's a question we got to ask each other. If you've been in this industry a while, if you're in the leader position. And I want to share something with you guys that's kind of personal to me, but it it motivates me. And if you're in this industry and you're a leader, you want to be a leader, I think it would do the same for you. Now you're here. Legacy mode. Not everybody gets here because legacy mode isn't automatic. It's intentional. It's when you look around and say, this can't end with me. It's when you stop hoarding wisdom like it's retirement savings and start sharing it like it's seeds. Because the next generation doesn't need another untouchable expert. They need you, the real you, The one with the scarred knuckles, the early mistakes, the humble lessons. They need you to teach, to write it down, to mentor, to record it, to give away what costs you something to learn. Let me tell you what legacy mode looks like in real life. Just this week, I got word that two young men I mentored, one from Philadelphia and one from New Orleans, both of them had never even heard of the HTM industry, but they went to school, stayed focused, earned their degrees, and both received job offers on the exact same day. That's not luck, that's legacy. And if that wasn't enough, my own son followed in my footsteps. Same field, same mission, different fire. And just recently, my son was selected by TechNation as one of their 40 under 40. Yes, I'm in legacy mode. Don't get it twisted. I'm also getting to enjoy that legacy. That's legacy mode at its best. Because this isn't just theory for me, this is testimony. Because if your impact dies with you, it wasn't legacy, it was ego. Let me say it this way: if your life is all about you, then your legacy will end with you. But if your life is about others, about lifting, equipping, serving, building, your legacy will echo. Legacy mode says, I'm not just here to perform, I'm here to prepare others to thrive long after I'm gone. And here's the real kicker: legacy mode starts now. You don't need 20 years in the game to lead with purpose. You don't need a fancy title to leave a trail. All you need is the willingness to say, let me make this better for the one coming behind me. A few questions I want to leave you with today. Who's coming behind you? Do they have what you didn't? Do they know what you wish someone would have told you? Do they see someone showing up on purpose? Let me say this as clear as I can. You skipped the line, you got cleared for takeoff, you owned your assignment. And now it's time. Legacy mode. Don't just finish strong, finish with a blueprint in your hand and someone walking behind you. Because what you've built is not just for you. Let me say that one more time. Because what you built, it's not for you, man. It's earned, not given. But when you're in legacy mode, you give it away anyway. Unseen, but unstoppable. See, that's to me what it's all about. Not just what we do, but what remains because we did it. Because one day all of us will step away from this industry. And when we do, people won't remember every repair. People won't remember long shifts. They'll remember how we showed up, who we invested in, who became better because we were there. And that's what today is really about, honestly. Not just experience, not just growth, but impact. And today you didn't just hear about it, you saw it. This is Kiara's first time delivering a presentation ever. She was nervous as heck, but hey, what I love about moments like this, though, is that you get to witness someone stepping into who they are becoming right in front of you. And that's something we can't buy. And I'll say this very clearly. She didn't just show up, she stood out. She brought clarity, she brought confidence, she brought purpose. She represented exactly what this industry needs next. So if we believe in mentorship, if we believe in building people, then this moment right here truly matters. So let's do this right. Let's give Kiara a big round of applause.
Oh, thank you guys.
And as you leave here today, don't just think about what you've built, think about who you're building. Thank you for your time, Kiara.
I just want to say thank y'all so much. That made my heart so warm. I really needed that. Thank you. Yes.
So,
Thank you guys.
so y'all have any questions for us? Sir. Mhm. Want me to go first? Or you?
Yeah, I'll go first. Just speaking from experience, especially for newer technicians coming into the field and knowing that they, even if they want to remain a technician, just want to maybe go into a specialty or to go into leadership like myself, you have to show the eagerness. You have to go up to these people that maybe you're nervous to speak to and just do it. And so far, I've gotten a great feedback as far as like, okay, you want to do this? Well, show me. And they'll set up shadowing dates or they'll give you a time to meet them somewhere and sit down and have that conversation. So, really just showing up and showing who you want to be like that you mean business as far as like, I want to be where you are in your shoes. Show me how to do so. So, really just making sure that you're going out your way, going above and beyond to show that you really want it. I think that's a good way to bridge it.
My mindset on bridging the gap, being in the industry so long, like Kiara lives in New York. I live in New Orleans. So our paths ain't crossed. But our experience in the industry crossed. I'm not trying to put Dewan out there, but Dewan introduced me to her before I even met her. So I think the way bridging works is through communication. And it's not just communicating with the person that you're bridging it with, it's everyone has to communicate because we was going to a show and he couldn't come. He said, "Hey, look, man, I got two of my team members coming down there. Reach out to them." And we went down to Dallas, met him. She met a bunch of people. And so that's true essence of bridging the gap. You know, me and him talk a lot. So just a simple phone call, text is here. That's how you bridge it. Good question.
Thank you.
You got a question, brother? Okay. You want to go? You go ahead.
My biggest hurdle, um, for me personally, I have to slow down. I sometimes go in head first without doing my due diligence, making sure that I know everything I'm about to get myself into. So honestly, I had to learn through trial and error to be intentional because working on equipment versus the transition of like public speaking or just meeting figures that I want to be like, I don't always see everything that they have to endure. I just see what it looks like from my POV as a tech. So I'm grateful that I get to see what they're doing. But once you hear it, you're like, okay, let me get my ducks in a row. Do I have all my education that I want first before I start getting into other people's lines of work? Same.
Yeah. My biggest hurdle, honestly, was stop depending on somebody else to make something happen for me. Because I always felt, man, I do everything I got to do. My manager's gonna take care of me. Well, that was a hurdle I had to realize it's not always the case. So when I stepped around that and started figuring out ways to do things of my own, everything changed. Good question. Any other questions, sir?
So, like I said, you had a really growing career. So, what stood out the most as far as your growth and you like ascending to the next level?
Like what helped me?
Yeah, what helped you, or maybe what something you encountered that you that kind of helped you got over that. You know, what's something that you learned or you went through that helped you prepare for the next level?
Yes. I think you gave me exposure. Just talking to the right people. You really never know how much someone genuinely knows. Like I just barged into his office his first weekend and I'm like, my name's Kiera. This is what I do now. This is what I want to be. But in that, I learned about these expos. I had been at my job for a year and I never knew this was even a thing. So when I got the opportunity to finally go to my first one in November, just to see all the love and all the tiny little jobs. You don't just have to be a tech to come here. You know what I mean? There's every type of role in the hospital is here at these expos. So just getting that exposure by talking to people that you do aspire to be like really helped me grow significantly in these past 6 months. So coming to the expo definitely helped me for sure.
Lee, tell me how you have grown in that role and how leading others.
Becoming a lead has been the best thing ever, but there's so many different strong personalities that you have to somehow understand, respect, and then try to collaborate on a new idea together. We all don't see things the same. We all don't even fix the same pump the same way. So really just learning how to talk to different team members and managers in a way where they can receive it, not just hear what I'm saying. That's been one of the biggest challenges I'm still learning right now, is just learning how to talk to different people in different tones and different translations to really get what I'm trying to say across.
Yes, yes, sir.
My name's Bryant too, so,
I'm with a T and a Y. You Bryant, I'm Bryant.
I'm somebody who I consider myself a Brit. I've been in this field for 15 years. So that's 22 and 30, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would say to you here, this field is bigger than you think. There's project management, there's projects that you can be on as a subject matter expert, or you can continue to turn regions and get expertise in radiology or telemetry, or it's really. My question is just for you, Brian. I saw a lot of pictures of you with young people. It seems like you're in or leading some sort of organization. Well, I want to hear more about.
Oh, yeah. Elevate HTM. I created that for what exactly says empowering you, uplifting professionals. And what we do is we go around to inner city schools and we talk to kids and we talk to thousands of kids. When I tell you Dallas, Florida, where else we been? Ohio, not one person heard of this industry. So my son does it. And the reason I shared that with him, it took me 10 minutes to convince him. And people said, well, that's your son. He heard of it by living with you. So I said, I'll show you different. 10 other kids that's doing this. So that's our passion. I mean, they got about 5 people in this room that's part of that. And if you want to join it, you're welcome to join. We talk more about it afterwards, but it's a nonprofit we created, and that's what we're trying to do, man. We're trying to make awareness to it. Yes, sir.
So earlier, not usually, like I'm not usually kind of a travel person. Earlier I spoke that I'm a veteran and I worked for aircraft for over 15 years. I went to school to be a manager. Got, at the age of, let's just say, I'm like 37. Now I'm trying to figure out
So let's go to Callie earlier, explaining, you know, I went from working at the VA, logistics, supplies, and you know, the guy that orders everything. I went from there to here where I am today. So I want to say that it's so inspiring because, you know, I'm 47. So to hear 2 years, 32 years, here it is, I years, 7 months. So my background is security, air, and logistics, and here it is, I'm coming to buyer. You said that there's a lot of people here that doesn't even have the experience of things in nature. That is true. And it's more inspiring because now the people
Yes.
Yep.
to figure it out. Let the age and area you met.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, brother.
Yes.
Any other questions? Any other questions?
What's been your biggest lesson learned, you know, as you start this nonprofit, you doing mentorship for several years now, exposing our industry to, you know, middle school, high school. So, as you're 3+ years into this now, what's been your biggest lesson learned engaging with the students?
They have to know you care. When you talk to them babies, I mean, they can see through you like you're not even standing there. And one of the things I always tell them is I love them. And I said, I'm here for that reason. I take PTO to go talk to them. And one kid was like, how you know you love me? You don't even know me. I said, because I'm standing before you. That's love showing up. And that telling you that makes it, because it's not easy. You'll go in a room and you might get one kid listening, and that's fine with me. I'll take that one kid. And you might get a whole room listening. Like we did a career day that was 2 weeks ago. It was 160 kids. The first 3 hours, eh, but that second half, oh, it was phenomenal. So you don't know. You go in the room, you got to go. I go in there thinking I'm gonna get them all, but you have to be consistent. And my hardest part is, like you said, one of my strongest parts is the passion drives me. Because if you don't have the passion for it, you're not gonna maintain it. And you need a good support system. And I have a ton of people that I mean, half this room is my support system, literally. I promise you. I talk to all of them on the phone. And that's what you need. It takes a village, and that's true story, I promise.
So you've been a major, you know, contributor to the industry, really impacted. Kind of share your contributions, like, you know, how many kids you reached out to.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
I started off with a podcast. It's called HTM on the Line. I just did my 100th episode 2 weeks ago. But and that was my goal, just to give flowers to our industry, because unfortunately we in the hospitals, nobody see us. We ain't our picture not on the wall at the hospitals. We probably by the morgue or the dumpster. So I tried to bring attention to us and give them flowers and appreciate them. And along the way, I started seeing how we struggling for people to be in this industry. And that's when I created this nonprofit. I do newsletters, bringing attention to people, trying to make them great. I do motivational videos every Monday. Get on my list, I'll shoot you on that email list. And it's all for love, I promise you. It's just something that we try to do. And the people I be around, we do the same thing. We all have the same goal, which is why I took to Kiara, Tish, Nessa, Nisa, I call her Nessa. And I just met Nisa there. So I always try to meet, and my guy Dedra, just met him today. So we always try to meet people, man, and bring them in. Because like I said before, it's as a leader, you want to multiply yourself. You don't want to just be that guy that know everything. And I try my hardest because I got to get these young people straight. Because guess what? They might have to hire me when I get older. So we got to build that future, guys. Because that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, honestly.